Mini episode 1092 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1092. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here with you today. We've got our Super Bowl preview for this year, and it is going to be a huge breakdown that we're going to be doing. A gentleman who joined us for breaking down the Super Bowl last year is back with us as well. He's been with us 3 times on the show previously, many episodes 816, 903, and 957. And this is a gentleman who is a veteran of the Super Bowl stage, a veteran of sacking Tom Brady, a veteran of playing against him in the Super Bowl. That was, of course, the first Rams-Patriots game, and now we got the second one coming up in the Super Bowl. I could only be speaking of one of the great defensive ends of his time, Chidi Ahanotu. Chidi, it is a pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank you for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
It's a real pleasure to have you back on, and this game obviously has an awful lot of intrigue, and it is yet another time for Tom Brady on the big stage. I don't know that any of us could have imagined when he and Belichick were first there in the Super Bowl back at this time in 2002 that this would be such a regular occurrence, the 9th time in the big game. On the other sideline, there is a raw-boned, big-armed young quarterback here, and I know there's some real fondness in your heart for him. You're actually the second guest that we've had in the last couple of weeks here to share an alma mater with Jared Goff, the other being the great Liz Clayman of Fox Business Network. So obviously she's cheering him on. I know you are as well, and you've got to be very proud of him. That's a guy, when he was coming out in the draft, I can tell everybody I told you so. I was dying for the Browns to get him. Everything worked out well for the Browns in the end, but boy, I could see it early on in college, the way this guy throws the deep ball, Chidi.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've admired him over the years in college and at Cal Berkeley. He definitely had a knack for the long ball and, generating a lot of offensive production. His demeanor, very stoic, very hard to rattle a guy. And, I couldn't be prouder. To see my alma mater on the big stage, especially at that position, the quarterback position. So we're all rooting for him, not only us former Rams, but all of us Cal Bears as well.
That's right. You got 2 reasons right there. Now, something that was interesting, I was checking this out this week. Hat tip to Cynthia Freeland. I was checking this out on the Game Theory and Money podcast. She mentioned this about Jared Goff in terms of his tendencies this year, that he's been super strong on second down, not so much on third down, and third down has been where there's been some unfortunate interceptions. I think a lot of times maybe he's tried to press to kind of make it happen. Is that, in your estimation, again, we're not looking at the specifics of the situations here, so just generally speaking, would it be your guess as an analyst that something like that would still kind of come from youth at this point, still kind of growing into the game? Or when a quarterback is that much better, by drastic margins on second down and third down, what do you think might be some of the reasons behind that?
Are we talking third and long or all third downs?
Well, all third downs, but you bring up an excellent point. I think Cynthia Freeland said that third down and long, obviously the numbers kind of got uglier the longer it was. So, maybe that's part of the answer right there, huh?
Well, I play defense, so one thing that happens on the third and long, we all know you're not going to run it. So
right.
When they have a running back like Todd Gurley, the defense is usually, trying to key on him in those early downs. Third down comes, they can kind of rally around the pass more. And as of late, they haven't been going to Gurley for some reason. I don't know why. So, his options decrease as far as where he can dump the ball off to, and maybe there's something he's, showing his hand of some sort. We key on every little thing, the way he looks off his receivers. I mean, there's all types of reasons why maybe teams are keen on him more on third downs. Maybe he's being too predictable. But I know this is throwing out things. I mean, it could be
Sure.
a whole range of issues of why a guy's stats might dip in the third and long.
Sure. Well,
I'd have to sit down and study the tape.
oh, sure, for the specifics. But, yeah, I mean, as far as the generalities go, but as an analyst, that's what we look to you for. I mean, you threw out a lot of good options, I think, and maybe no better option than the first one you said, which is that it's a little more predictable on third and long. You're probably not going to be able to run the ball, especially when, and it's so interesting you mentioned Todd Gurley, because I wanted to talk about him a little bit, because to me, I was looking at the recent history of the Super Bowl, and when you're looking at a guy, I think there is, and I've been big on him ever since his days at Georgia, and I knew that he was going to be the next big thing coming in. When you look at a guy who was arguably the best running back in the league, and yeah, he had kind of a rough effort there in New Orleans. That ball that went right through his hands that led to the interception. He didn't have a lot of bursts the times he was in there, but hey, C.J. Anderson was going pretty good, so they didn't really need Todd Gurley. They're going to need him to win this game. But it's interesting because a guy who is one of the best backs in the game, if not the best back, you don't see that on the big stage very much in the 21st century. I was kind of looking at this like Edgerrin James, Hall of Fame caliber running back, but he made it in 2009. His best days were kind of behind him. Corey Dillon and Sean Alexander a little earlier in the decade, but neither one of those guys were Hall of Famers because their careers were a little bit shorter. Todd Gurley, if he plays a full career, certainly projects to be a Hall of Famer. When you look at a Hall of Fame guy in his prime in the Super Bowl, I almost wonder if you got to go back to when you were in the game, Marshall Faulk. I think there's a good case to be made that Todd Gurley might be the best running back in a Super Bowl since Marshall Faulk.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. They both have the same style of play, being a run threat and a passing threat. I mean, I'm kind of biased by Lynch, maybe in the Hall of Fame one day. So, he's a Cal Berkeley guy, so
yeah.
I don't know if he has the numbers to make the Hall of Fame, but he's a Hall of Fame in my book. And he's played in the Super Bowl, obviously, with the Seahawks since Marshall played with me.
That's right.
But no, it has been rare. We haven't had a ton of great running back that I can remember since Marshall.
Yeah.
That been on the center stage.
It's been kind of weird. Yeah, I don't exactly know why that's been. And yeah, you're right because Lynch would obviously be one of the guys that's on that list, but it's not a very long list in the 21st century. It's weirder than you would think to see Todd Gurley there, and not least of which because people in the media aren't really talking it up that much, that it's kind of an anomaly to see such a great running back in the Super Bowl. Something else that it's an anomaly to see, you don't see it that many times where there's a guy who was arguably the best defensive player in the game who was in the Super Bowl. J.J. Watt hasn't made it to the Super Bowl this decade. The list kind of goes on. Von Miller's been there twice. You could look at the Legion of Boom guys and make a case for them the times they were there, but the guy that most people would probably finger as being the best defensive player in the game right now, Aaron Donald. Jay Glazer had singled him out earlier this week. It was a great column on The Athletic as being the non-quarterback in this game who might make the biggest splash. I think there's a case to be made that he might make the biggest splash, period, when you're looking at this, because I think this is something we talked about last year going into the Super Bowl. Teams that can establish a four-man rush on Tom Brady have been successful. Now, the Eagles managed to do it last year by outscoring them as opposed to the four-man rush, although they got pressure at critical times, not least of which when they forced the strip sack. So Aaron Donald, with everything he can bring to bear, you got Ndamukong Suh, one of the great defensive players of the generation, also right next to him there at defensive tackle and playing several years younger, it looks like, in these playoffs because he's certainly played better than he has during the regular season. So I'd like to get your thoughts as a defensive lineman yourself about Donald and the rest of that front four and how critical they are to the outcome of this game.
Well, I'm a defensive lineman, so, honestly, and I don't think it's preached and harped on enough, if any pass is completed, if you're a defensive lineman, you should take that personally. Because if you get in that quarterback space or knock the ball down or hurry them or sack them, pressure them, that ball doesn't get completed. And, you know, if defensive line can do that all game long, you're going to win all day long. You're going to win every time. There's very little positions out there on the field that can affect the game so directly and immediately than the defensive line. So, you know, you got Aaron Donald. I mean, people used to say Warren Sapp, a teammate of mine in Tampa Bay, you know, they never see another guy like him. And he was a very special player. He changed the game. Aaron Donald is right there with Warren as far as changing the game, changing the prototypical type of defensive lineman that people think of. You know, he's a guy you have to worry about every play and can change the game. So if they can get him going, Tom Brady's gonna have a long day, long night, and he can definitely impact that game.
No question about that. And when you look at it again, the strongest part collectively, certainly of that defense, the front four. But if you isolate it a little bit more, obviously Donald, obviously Sue, who is somebody who has put together a Hall of Fame career himself, and again, looks to have turned back the years a little bit in the 2 playoff games here. There's been some speculation that maybe, knowing that this was coming, there was going to be a long playoff run. Maybe he was kind of saving up for it physically a little bit. That's just speculation, but he certainly looked better in January than he did for a chunk of the season. And then the other part of that combination would obviously be you get into the schematics of Wade Phillips and everything that he brings to bear. And it's long been my contention on this show that coordinators should be eligible for the Hall of Fame as well. You don't generally get that much. If they were, Wade Phillips would be a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. I think he's worthy of having a bust in Canton. Now, obviously, he's gone up against the Patriots in some big games this decade with what happened in Denver there. But as far as how he's going to deploy Donald and Sue, and the rest of the front four as well. But when you're looking at a linebacking core that really kind of falls off fairly steeply in some ways from what you're seeing from the front four, if you're Wade Phillips, if you're just sitting there at the chalkboard, what are you thinking might be some good ways to deploy these two guys and the rest of your front four against Brady and that offensive line?
Well, honestly, you know, I'm pretty impressed with their entire front four. Ubican and I don't remember the other end's name.
Oh, yeah, the guy from Jacksonville. Yeah. Fowler.
Yeah. I'm pretty impressed with both of those guys as well. And when you have a Donald and a Sue in the middle, you have an opportunity to really exploit those outside because no one's really going to be paying attention to those guys. I honestly believe those two ends can really impact the game. If I was Wade, I would be focusing on them. I mean, you know, all eyes will be on Sue and Donald. And while you're paying attention to those guys, meanwhile, your ends can be wrecking havoc. So there'll be chip blocking on the inside, I'm sure, with the back releasing on the inside, double teaming, of course. So while you have all that action going on the inside of the line, your ends have an opportunity to really cause some damage.
That's an excellent point, and Fowler is somebody who, again, didn't get off to the greatest start in his career, but certainly had a lot of raw physical talent as a high first-round pick, and the Rams have basically seen that investment in him pay off, and you're absolutely right that they can get a lot of pressure from the outside as well. Now, one of the things that I've heard in the analysis of this week, it's been pointed out in a few quarters, and justifiably so, that if you just look at on paper in the NFC Championship game, the job that the Rams did as far as the running game of New Orleans, if you take that literally, just the running backs in the running game, they did pretty much keep them under lock and key. Having said that, Kamara kind of went bananas the way that he generally does on the short passes, the screen passes, etc. So, on the whole, a pretty good day for the New Orleans running backs if you're just looking at total yardage, which at the end of the day is, you know, the real indicator of success, we would all agree. So when you're looking at this, I mean, if you're the Rams, if you're looking at the job you did on stopping them, again, the Rams defensively this year, in terms of rushing yards, they were 23rd in the league. So they gave up a lot of rushing yards. Obviously, again, they did a better job on Championship Sunday than they did through the course of the year. Would you feel pretty good about that going into New England, or would it still be kind of daunting because even if you shut down Sony Michel and James White on the runs, they're still going to be able to bust you up with the screen passes? I wonder how optimistic or pessimistic they might be coming off of that performance facing a New England team that's going to put a lot of pressure on them with that game.
Yeah, I mean, you just faced the two of the best in the game, and the Saints running backs. So it can do nothing but boost your confidence going into the Super Bowl. Sonny Michel is a very capable back, but I'm sorry, he's not an Alvin Kamara.
No.
By any means. And then you got James White there as well, who, a little bit of scat back. But you got the running back Ingram, who they bottled up as well. So I mean, it could be nothing but boost their confidence. I'm sure they won't be overly confident because you got to take everything seriously in the Super Bowl. But I'm pretty sure that they're feeling good about themselves.
Oh, they gotta be, yeah. Because again, they've had a better effort against the running game recently than they've had. Of course, the thing is, Brady is good at using the backs to attack through the air, and he kind of has to because again, this is. With Josh Gordon going by the wayside, which those of us in Cleveland could have seen coming a mile away, they don't really have a classic deep threat at this point. You've got Edelman kind of going up the seam. You've got Gronkowski, who is, for a tight end, he's a deep threat, but you kind of have to put that qualifier on it. So it's a very interesting kind of a dynamic here because I almost think it's kind of a throwback maybe to when you guys played Brady in the Super Bowl because he became more of a classic kind of deep passer, successful, statistical quarterback in the middle part of his career into the latter part of his career. But this year, with the short passes, with the timing routes, getting the ball out of his hand quickly, and exploiting defenses in that way, it's been really interesting that he hasn't really needed a deep threat. He hasn't needed somebody to be able to go over the top. Philip Dorsett, I guess, can do it once in a blue moon when they need it done. But it's very interesting because people talk about how Jared Goff has suffered since Cooper Kupp went down to injury, and that's true. The Rams' offense hasn't been the same, but he's still got Woods. He's still got Brandon Cooks able to go deep. Brady doesn't really have the deep threat, and yet, strangely enough, it hasn't hurt him thus far. I wonder if it's going to hurt him in the Super Bowl or not.
Well, I mean, he's been a methodical quarterback his whole career. I mean,
Right.
Their system just taking little chunks down the field, all the way down the field. I mean, the only time, what was the receiver's name? My mind blanks out.
Moss.
Sometimes.
Randy Moss.
Yeah, Randy. That was the last time they had a long threat, a real deep ball threat.
Yeah, that's true. And again, they had.
But honestly, Rick. I think the Patriots kind of squeaked into the whole situation. I mean, they got a favorable matchup with the Chiefs, with the horrible defense they have, and they got to play them. Did they play them in New England? I believe they played them in New England.
Previously, yeah. And
no, in the championship game.
That was KC. Yeah, but they.
They played KC. KC. But the fact is, their defense is it's just a joke, honestly. I mean, they hadn't stopped anybody all year.
Right.
So I think they kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say squeaked in, but this Rams defense is not the Kansas City Chiefs defense. They're a lot more formidable. A lot better coached. They fired their defensive coordinator for the Chiefs shortly after the.
Yeah.
So I think the Patriots are going to have a rough go of it. I mean, honestly, throughout the season, I think what saved the Patriots was Edelman coming back.
That's right.
Because Gronk is so beat up, and Sonny Michel and James White, they weren't really. I don't know. No one's really scared of those guys. Once Edelman came back, Brady can get to his methodical thinking back, and I think that's what really got them to the Super Bowl.
That's a great point. And again, he is a very methodical quarterback. You are right about that, and he's going to have to be very effective in that role on Sunday if he's going to be successful. And there's no comparing the Chiefs' defense to the Rams' defense, not least of which, again, You got players like Sue and Donald, but also the coaching of Wade Phillips, who is among the elite of the elite. As far as coaching goes, people are focusing on the head coaching matchup, the young wizard and the older wizard of McVay v. Belichick. And I got to say, I mean, I'm kind of heartened talking to you the way that you seem to be leaning in this game because, again, those of us in Cleveland, where I'm based, got no love for Bill Belichick and never will. So I'm in the same boat I was in a year ago where I think the Patriots are going to win. I don't want that to be the case. Right now, I think I would say Patriots 31-27, but it's weird because the analytics seem to be pointing towards the Rams. I think the wise guys are kind of going towards the Rams because the line, as soon as it got up to Patriots -3, the wise guys jumped on it and bet it back down. So the people with the calculators seem to think that the Rams have a chance, or a very good chance. Those of us doing the eye test kind of a thing tend to think, God, here go the Patriots again, and be resigned to the inevitable. But I'm very heartened that somebody who played the game at a high level like you doesn't seem to think that's an inevitability. So maybe there's a good chance for the Rams.
I mean, all you got to do is get the ball to Todd Gurley, as far as I'm concerned, and they'll win that game. You know, that's a running back they haven't been utilizing over the playoffs, and I don't know why. I mean, is he hurt? I mean, I don't really understand what's going on.
I don't think he's hurt. I don't think that's the case. I think, you know, he was a little banged up late in the year, but I think he's good to go now. And I would agree with you. Yeah, I mean, if they can unleash Todd Gurley, it is going to be a long day for New England, and something that I would very much like to see in that regard. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I want to note also, Chidi, that this was very interesting. This was something you had keyed in on Twitter, and this was something somebody else had flagged for me as being very, very significant. It's not getting a lot of run in the media. It'll be interesting to see if Roger Goodell gets asked about it this week. But you flagged on Twitter that story about the NFL's challenges with insurance, and the fact that there's only one insurer that will take them on anymore for head injuries and that type of thing, and that it presents, I think, a critical risk to the future of the NFL, because if that kind of stuff gets to be ruled uninsurable by any of the big insurers out there, I mean, it might be melodramatic to say the NFL shuts down, but the challenges in terms of reopening would be just staggering. So I want to commend you for having pointed out that story, because it's way more significant than anybody thinks right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use Twitter that often, so I'm surprised you saw that. But I'm more of a Facebook guy. But I saw that, and I just really piqued my interest because, you know, over the next 5 years, I don't know how long it would take for it to, you know, negatively impact the game, but you know, that's a real problem if the insurance carriers don't back the NFL anymore. You know, it leaves them very vulnerable. Something like that, maybe through collective bargaining agreements, you can kind of stave off those kind of issues, because you can address it up front. In the case of those type of injuries, X, Y, and Z would happen, instead of just leaving it up to insurance battles. But I'm not an insurance guy by any means, and I don't know exactly how it all works, but I just know that if you try to have a viable business and nobody will cover you, that's not good.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not good at all.
I'm not an insurance guy either, Chidi, but you identified the only thing that people really need to know, which is that point there, that without, and again, everything else, apparently the NFL will still be able to get insured, because there's no fear on the part of any insurance carriers or anything like that of anything else that could lead them to go bust. But the NFL's got to have the head angle covered, because that's the one, and you and I have talked about this on the show, that justifiably so, the NFL is going to have to keep ponying up well into the future as a result of the legacy of when you were playing and even before you. You go back to the leather helmets guys, and that the NFL's got a lot to answer for financially here, and the insurers are looking at it, and they're making a very rational decision that, hey, these guys aren't a good insurance risk. And when you add it all up, again, the thing you pointed out, that bottom line is the only thing anybody really needs to know at this point, which is if the NFL loses that last insurance carrier that is willing to cover this stuff, they are screwed big time.
Yeah, I mean, not looking at what may happen in the future, even what's going on as we sit here with our lawsuit against the NFL for the NFL concussion issue. I mean, they already spent, I forget the exact number, but they've already spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think it's a $65 billion lawsuit. But you know, if they never thought they'd have to actually pay that $65 billion, but that the rate is going,
yeah,
you might reach that number.
Very possibly, and justifiably so, because there is, as we've said previously on the show, a moral obligation to make good for everybody that laid their bodies on the line, and a lot of times under false pretenses, with the risks not being fully expressed to everybody as they are today. And again, a different game today, a safer game today, but we'll get to see how much further that can even endure into the future with this insurance question. But yeah, something that somebody should ask Roger Goodell this week at one of the press conferences, but I'm guessing they probably won't, and the NFL-approved media will not go out of their way to bring it up. But that's why when you do a segment like this, you want to do it with somebody outside of the NFL-approved media. So, Chidi, it is a real pleasure to have you on the show here. A fourth great appearance for you on the program here. A wonderful analysis of the Super Bowl, and just a real pleasure every time we get a chance to talk to you, sir. Look forward to the next time we get to do it, and thank you so much for carving out time for us.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it too, Chidi. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for checking out FDH Lounge mini episode number 1092.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and The Periodic Table of Elements.